First off, I want to thank the brave men and women who work behind the wall. I want to thank them on a national level because their job goes unrecognized.
How do they try to turn a guard?
Well, correctional officer. Sorry, I apologize. But correctional officer.
How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, this video is going out for a friend of ours. We're going to touch on another topic that's very important and definitely something that needs to get out there. Guys, the topic is correctional officers. They should be seen as law enforcement. So today, we're actually going to have a discussion as to why we feel correctional officers are part of that law enforcement family. It's going to be a quick back and forth, but trust and believe, guys, everything we say is to bring respect to this profession. The work that correctional officers do is of a law enforcement capacity, and we're going to explain that work for the people that just may not understand that. Now, great guest, Soto. What's up, Soto?
Hey, how we doing? Gangi, just glad to be back on the show. I always enjoy these talks, and this one's one and that's dear to my heart. So I'm just can't wait to get into it.
Yeah, I chose you for a reason because you do work in a state where they are considered law enforcement. Actually, the title is Senior Correctional Police Officer. So maybe we could talk about what type of responsibility comes with that title. But having said that, once you get it, this is also what's going to be expected of you once you embrace that law enforcement title. Now, guys, if you haven't, the show Tier Talks for you, brave men and women that work in corrections. So please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. We're going to go to our sponsor, and when we come back, we're going to be discussing, yes, correctional officers are law enforcement. Stand by.
I wanted to attend a university that had an intelligence program. I wanted to look at problems different. I wanted to increase my critical thinking abilities. AMU offered those avenues to expand. Obtaining your degree as an adult, you're actually paying yourself and investing in yourself. You can't put a dollar on it. It's priceless. It's something that can never be taken away from you.
American Military University. Learn from the leader.
All right, and we're back. You know, real quick, so I think this is interesting. So when I started working for my state at the very beginning of my career in 2002, I was introduced to an academy that, told us, yeah, corrections is law enforcement. So where I work in my state, they are law enforcement. I didn't know, it took me years to learn that not all states are considered in that same light. And it did blow me away. It did, because knowing the work that we do, I just couldn't understand how the other states or the other agencies are not seen in that same light. So I guess the first question I want to ask is, why is it so complicated first for these entities that are in the ability, that have the ability to make this happen, to make us law enforcement? Why are they so hesitant in doing that?
Well, Gangi, you have to kind of understand as well that not all law enforcement see themselves as equal. Within the police community itself, in some states, you'll think like the state police thinks of themselves that they're the highest and upper echelon of policing in the state. And then they may not look at themselves as equals to the municipal cop or the, park police or the campus police. When in fact, all these entities are all part and all fall under the same umbrella. And some states, make it law, make it like the state that I work in, they're all considered peace officers. So they fall under the law enforcement umbrella. So we all follow the Attorney General guidelines for the state that we live in, but not all states do that. Some states consider their corrections officers, they don't even call them that. They would call them detention officers or, any other title other than a law enforcement title. And I don't understand what the reasoning behind it, besides it all being, once you get that title of law enforcement, there's a lot of more responsibilities that go with it. And with responsibility, you have to also compensate the individual because of all those new responsibilities.
Yeah, and what's funny? I know before we go into why we feel that correctional officers should be seen as law enforcement. I want people to know this is why we can't embrace that older title of prison guard or the guard mentality, because no one's going to give a guard law enforcement mentality, law enforcement title. And the reason why I'm saying that, guys, is because we ourselves think, well, labels don't matter. No, they do. They do in how we are perceived. So again, a guard may not be seen as someone that has law enforcement abilities, where an officer is. It's a step up from, it's a big step up from just the term guard. And I want you to know that when we move forward, it's not to negate or minimize the importance of where that word originates. We know there's a very powerful history connected to the word guard, but let that be the foundation. It's time to evolve. So the first thing I would say, again, is just that we have to embrace this ourselves and realize that the title of officer, corrections officer, correctional officer, detentions officer, whatever it is, the title of officer is that level of professionalism that starts to make people look at you as, wow, this person is a professional, and this person probably has some law enforcement capabilities. Because again, officer tends, in my mind, to connect to that law enforcement perspective. So would you agree? So as we move forward, obviously we have to let go of that term of prison guard and start embracing the officer label.
Absolutely. And you know that I've worked at the police academies and training new police officers, new correctional police officers. And in the state that I work in, it's kind of great because all the academies, most of the academies fall into this one place, one category, and are all guided under the Police Training Commission. I would wish that all other places would adopt a policy like that one. But we have to look at the job itself, what entails to be a correctional police officer, a detention officer, and under the police training guidelines here in the state that I work in, there is very little difference in the training that a correctional police officer gets to when you compare it to a police officer in a regular street or state police. We're all guided under the same principles. We get taught the same exact lesson plans. The correctional police officers would probably have a higher concentration on, like your book, let's plug it in, right? Inmate manipulation, cell block, and stuff like that has a validity to what we're going to do day to day. But they also teach them how to do vehicle stops, how to do, the normal everyday, how to do investigations, how to protect evidence, how to do all those things. I've even taught the class where we teach them, because we're going to end up in court at one time or another, right? Courtroom demeanor. These are all the things that all police academies teach that also correctional police officers get. And it's all in their tool belt. They may not get like what here in New Jersey is Title 39, which is like, motor vehicle statutes, because we're not going to use it inside of a prison setting or maybe on the grounds. But more and more, as years progress, as states progress, they see that they can use a correctional police officer not only just inside the police or inside our institutions, but they're also used outside of the police, outside of the prison setting, where they can help and assist and be another source or support to your local police department.
Right. And guys, corrections is a community itself. The correctional officers are the ones that respond to the emergencies, no different than the police responded to emergency out on the street. We're not calling 911. I mean, we are the ones that respond, and we're the ones that handle everything from fights, murders, rapes. I mean, and again, the investigations that has to be done behind it. We are the ones preserving the evidence and making sure that we maintain whatever is needed so it can go to trial and hold up with some level of integrity. We also are positive influences to the inmate population, trying to do our best to reinforce them to go to programming, go to education, and working with the civilians to make sure that happens. So again, we're very active in a community that does move. I mean, again, just by limiting us and limiting our label, it kind of limits the function. It really does. I mean, I still think people believe that we work in a world that doesn't move, and obviously that's not the case. Our worlds move every day, and our interactions with the inmates are far more greater than it ever was, 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. And each interaction that we have with the inmates is meant to push an expectation, an expectation of, this is what's expected of you while you're here. And if you're not, then we have the ability to, do what we can to protect that community and keep the mission of rehabilitation moving forward. Because that's ultimately what our game is, to make sure that we, yes, service the population, protect and serve, but on the other side of that, we're the ones that are also protecting and serving the community. Because, if you look at things the way it is now, defunded police, but yet we're all going to call the police when we need help. How hypocritical, just it really is. Or, empty out the prison. You don't need the prisons. Yeah, you do. There are some people that are extremely dangerous, and there are people every day, like, as I said, correctional officers and civilians that are putting their lives on the line. But with the correctional officers, they're the ones that have to respond. They're the ones that have to protect whatever's happening, to protect those civilians so they can do their job, to make sure that when we rehabilitate, we actually have people that can go out there and actually do something productive. But let's not forget, guys, all because you don't see it, the people behind the wall, those officers, are risking their lives every day to protect and serve the public. And I think, Soto, that's forgotten a lot because it's not out there in the public for the public to see.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Being that we are in that enclosed setting, and most of our field, 90-95% of our field is inside the walls, inside those, fences or whatever the case may be. But what I do have to explain to you that I've gotten back from not only, recruits that I've trained, that I've seen throughout the years grow and progress, but I've seen it from police officers out in the street that I've trained myself, that started their field in corrections and moved on to like a municipal department or the sheriff department, or, becoming internal affairs and stuff like that. And they are in turn so grateful to starting their career inside of a prison, because as we know, inside of the prison, we do get trained in weapons qualification, whether it be a handgun, shotgun, rifle, all that. But as soon as we hit that wall, we turn all that equipment in, and we're going into the institution, and we kind of hone our skills in de-escalation tactics, right? So we never go to a tool on our belt first, because all the time we're practicing and practicing and practicing de-escalation techniques, right? We're in there with the inmate population, and it's just a day-to-day routine where we're sitting there and we are confronted with could be a disturbance or an argument or something like that. And we don't have a gun to go to. We don't have a taser to go to, right? We go into the de-escalation mode. And most of these officers that I've later on contacted, or they've contacted me or talked to me, they've expressed how great it has been, how great of an experience it's been, because it's helped them out in the street. It helps them out in their daily functions now, because they know how to handle situations a little bit better than just say, okay, what am I going to do in this instance when there's a domestic violence call, or there's anything else that, you don't see every day. You don't see every day, but those arise quite often enough that a police officer is confronted with that, and they're ready to use a tool on their belt. And the likelihood or the possibility of what's going on in the news now, that the improper use of force can be employed, right, gets minimized when someone has the training or the background that we do when we do correctional officers or correction police officers.
Yeah, by the way, we still take the same levels of use of force training. And also, we are the kings and queens of domestic violence responses, because everything we do is within that house. And I want to add something, because Luis mentioned something so great. I mean, think about that. For a police officer to come back and say, hey, that time in corrections, the stuff I learned that helped me de-escalate, that's amazing. To me, that's why I say corrections is not a stepping stone, because if you're providing valuable tools to, let's say, the police, I think it's very hard for police to say that, wow, that you guys are beneath us. Yeah, but everything that you're doing that's making you a better officer has the foundation of where you come from, which in this case, if you came from corrections, you can't deny the fact that we taught you some serious skills. And the reason why we're good at those skills is because it's survival for us. Communication's our survival, not our weapon. You know what I mean? You're right. I can't go to my weapon to survive because I may not have any. So I've learned to use communication in the most desperate of hours, and it really makes you effective because, again, you're backed into a corner. And then when you start to learn that to survive, how do you not become skilled at communication? And for me, one of the reasons, again, professional law enforcement, the title professional law enforcement definitely should apply to what we do is because we are masters of de-escalation. Communication's key when it comes to, having that law enforcement responsibility because it's communication that enforces directives, enforces compliance. Trust and believe, we don't want to put our hands on people to get them to comply. We want them to listen to our directives because we know how to communicate with that element, which I think makes us very effective. Would you agree?
I agree with that wholeheartedly. And also, we get a lot of practice, unfortunately, when we say responding wise to incidents occurring. And when an incident is at a level that's like at a 10, we go in, we deal with the incident, we try to de-escalate it. We actually are great at, putting restraints on individuals, right? Where I see a lot of issues sometimes in the streets where police officers are putting away their guns or putting away their tools, and now they're trying to handcuff an individual, and sometimes takes a little longer. Than we have the ability that we do it so often that we get better and better and better at it, that we know how to put these handcuffs on, we know how to put them on properly, and we know how to de-escalate the situation where now the use of force is done. Let's get these individuals where they need to go, where we need to go. And I think it's just the skills that we learn by doing every single day. Our observation skills become so keen. Residents or inmates are great at hiding contraband, at hiding weapons, and we're always on the lookout for things like that. Isn't that the same thing that officers need to do when they go out in the street every day and they're on their beat? They're observing and they're looking, or maybe they're serving a warrant, or maybe they're doing, anything that's in their power to do. But those skills are just so great and ingrained in us as far as correctional officers that it just helps. That's why I like the sheriff's department, that most sheriff's departments actually make their officers work the local jail first before they go out into the street and partner them up with, like a veteran officer to continue their training. It's awesome.
Yeah, and I also would like to say, guys, with that law enforcement title, you're going to have to do proper background checks, which is great. We want to do that. We should be doing that already, exhausting everything. So that law enforcement title may get us the money that we need to really start properly vetting the system, technically, and start bringing in people that we know are capable of doing the job because we've exhausted every effort to say that they're not. Because that's the mindset you go into, and the thing is that right now, when you don't have that law enforcement label, I don't know if we're going that extra mile. Plus, I will tell you one thing too, when it becomes that being that law enforcement, that sworn title, it also ups the consequences when you do something wrong. Like I have a feeling like when you start just putting people in that are not considered that sworn law enforcement, which by the way, guys, the correctional officers are the fail-safe. They're the last resort. So that's the highest level of security that we need to make sure that all things run smoothly. So when you sit there and you don't put enough into that final result, and you're just saying, well, it's okay to put a civilian in that position, well, then, the civilian, again, guys, don't take it the wrong way, but being a sworn law enforcement officer, it heightens the consequences if they do something wrong, because you are once sworn and you're in a trusted position. That trusted position says that, hey, this is your prescribed role, that's their prescribed role, and at the end of the time, if ever you cross those boundaries, you're going to be held at a higher level of responsibility because of your position of authority. But more importantly, you're a sworn officer that has the trust of the public. So, wouldn't you think, to me, that would motivate people to want to get that law enforcement title? One, because it's going to, again, with the backgrounds, we're not just going to take anybody because they have to meet that criteria. And the second part is that trust, as obviously done through consequence. Because sometimes, be honest with you guys, the consequences matter. They do. But the consequences really become heightened when you have that sworn law enforcement officer who breaks the rules. Would you agree, Soto?
You know, you're right, Ganji, and you hit it right on the button too. Most places are doing that extensive background check on each and every one of their candidates before they're onboarding them as, you know, correctional officers. So you know for a fact that they're going through this rigorous, extensive background check. Sometimes they're doing medical background checks. They're doing psychological tests. All of this is being done because that profession is a professional setting where you need qualified individuals, right, who are without reproach, right, and that the public can, right, and trust them with the care of these inmates, right, to serve out their sentences, to serve out their time, and hopefully rehabilitate them so that they can get back and reintegrate into society. So I agree wholeheartedly. And, you know, more and more and more states should be looking to ensuring that their officers are considered law enforcement titles.
Yeah, and when you ask, like, hey, what's the number one function? Protect and serve. What's the number one function for police on the streets? Protect and serve. And by the way, law enforcement is not just limited to police. There's different, you know, entities. You know, not law. Everybody's like, well, you're not police. Well, that's not the only, you know, law enforcement entity. I mean, and to be honest with you, for police who think that, come on, guys. I mean, there's a lot of different entities out there that serve a different function of law enforcement roles. You know, us in corrections completing the circle, because again, if you, here's the funny thing. If it's law enforcement and individuals that are handling them on the streets, then why wouldn't we pass them off to other professionals when they come into the prison system? Why would all of a sudden I say, well, this person's dangerous in the streets, but I don't have to hand them over to any other law enforcement? Nope, I'll just hand them over to these people here and we'll be okay. No, we need to maintain that same level of trust, which means that if the law enforcement's handling that threat in the community, you know, the threat still exists behind that wall where we're focusing on rehabilitating and moving that person forward because we can't hold them forever. So we need to make sure that while we focus on that, however aggressively, that we're surrounded by law enforcement professionals who can maintain the safety and security needed to rehabilitate, which is one, protecting the inside, but more importantly, protecting the outside. So it's crazy how that's not seen. And most of the time, Soto, you know who our worst enemies are. And it's sad to say, because I don't look at us as competitors, but sometimes it's the police. It's the police that sometimes don't want to see us as equals for whatever reason it is. But it's insane to me because you're trusting me to finish your work. I mean, that's what it is. Hey, great job on catching them. That's great. But what's next? We have to maintain them, you know? And then when you pass them off, it's like, well, you know, you're not saying we're equal, but yet you're trusting me with the most dangerous person you ever had to deal with. You know, what's that say about you?
Exactly. But you hit it on the nail again. You hit it on the head because remember, it's all under that same umbrella. You have to pass this individual off from place to place to place, from professional entity to the next professional entity to the next professional entity. So are you going to tell me that, again, probation officers don't have law enforcement powers, that parole officers don't have law enforcement powers? These are all professional entities that are completing the final project. It's all a criminal justice system where we all are a part of it, right? All these wheels just need to be as professional as possible, and we need to respect each other. But you're correct. Police officers sometimes don't want to give us the credit, and I don't understand why, because you have all sorts of people that are law enforcement. Like I mentioned before, you have park police. They're police officers. Campus police that are in our universities and colleges. They're police, right? You have anything. You have game wardens. You have all these individuals that have their little realm that they all control, and they all have the same law enforcement powers, and they're all doing the same goal, to protect and serve, right? And we're always doing that.
Yeah, and again, just before we come to a close, guys, I mean, if you look at the service that's provided in corrections, it is our community, and we don't call for outside help. We are the first responders. We're the ones that save lives, because that's what we do. You know, breaking up fights, we're saving lives. You know, medical emergencies, we're there, probably the first responder before medical can get there. You know, and there's such a good partnership with that community. Like, I never once, you know, in my time when there was a fight, I never once told a civilian who may have needed my help, say, no, you got to call 911. You know, that's us. We're going to respond, and we respond with the same amount of urgency that you would find on the streets, you know, and we put the same amount of risk on the line as they do on the street. So for us not to be seen as that, it kind of really condescends what we do. And I like what you said, you know, maybe because people stay away from it because it could cost more money, but it's worth it because now you're going to add resources on the streets if you need it, you know. And again, well, we need more professionals. Well, that's why when you get the label, you increase the background checks, you know, so it will give you the people that you want, you know what I mean? But in the meantime, you know, and I'll also tell you one thing, that law enforcement title may even motivate people to want to come into this profession, maybe stay in this profession, because it would be great for us to have that title and sit next to police officers and say, hey, how's your line of work? Same here as mine, and just have that equality there, as opposed to saying, well, no, you're just beneath us, and not to be seen as equals. It breaks my heart when we all go out to this event and, you know, you're hanging out with other law enforcement agencies. If you happen to get invited to this event, because 9 times out of 10, we never do. But then you're kind of at a back table by yourself and nobody wants to talk to you because everybody else feels that they're above you. You know, and I just want to say one thing. I remember when I had an argument one time with a police officer and I was discussing the work we do in comparison to what they do. Really no difference. Again, we're the first responders. They're the first responders. And then when the person had nowhere to go, and I think I laid out a pretty good argument, they said, well, how much do you make? Well, why does that matter? Yes, we deserve more money, but are you trying to say because I make less, I don't deserve the law enforcement title? I want the law enforcement title so we can make more. But look at that. They ran out of a way to go against it, so they went to the money being paid. That's not what makes you a law enforcement professional. And I will say one last thing, so think about this too. The correctional officers that do the job and they're not getting paid that much, and it's sad because they do deserve more, their motivation is to do the job. Think about it. You know, if you know, for someone to ask me how much am I being paid, all I can say, well, is that why you do the job? Because right now, that's not our motivation. We do the job because the fucking job has to get done and no one else is going to do it. But what, any thoughts you have in closing, Soto?
Yeah, once again, I just, you know, we like to always bring these topics up to light and to discuss them in this fashion so that people can understand that, yes, we are a law enforcement entity. We do have that baseline of professionalism that everybody has. And we would love for any day, any time for us to have this chat with our counterparts and understanding that we are all in a complete system. Like you mentioned earlier, you know, you catch them, we keep them, and then we have to hand them off to the later entities like the parole or probation or anything else that will continue that whole criminal justice cycle. So like I said, everybody out there, be safe. Keep those questions coming in. We love when the questions come in because we know it's something that you're going to listen to here, and hopefully we're giving you some insightful information.
And if anything, guys, it's to start the dialogue. That's the key. Let's start the dialogue that people aren't having. As always, guys, the show is Tear Up. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Stay safe.